Well, we started IndieCade. First started working on it in 2005, I think, because we thought that the video game industry was kind of the victim of its own success and that it was getting less and less innovative. Everything was all the same game genres. They were really focused on technological development and they had kind of put gameplay innovation to the side. And there were a lot of really cool works that we were seeing in alternative spaces like art game exhibitions, for instance, big game festivals and so forth that were not really easy to see. It was very hard to see those kinds of games. So we decided to create a juried event that would showcase alternative games that were being produced outside of the mainstream video game industry. Well, they were starting to get a little bit of visibility due to the internet, but they were in spaces like, for instance, the art game environment was one where if you went to an indie game festival in 2005 or 6, before we started IndieCade, you would never see an art game in an indie game festival because they were sort of considered something different, even though they were also indie. You would also never see a serious game. And you would also never see things like an alt control game or even a big game or a live action role playing game. So we wanted to broaden the scope of what an indie game festival represented. And also we were just really interested in games as a cultural form as opposed to a product. So I think one of the things we talk about that really distinguishes IndieCade games from mainstream games is that they're not based on marketing constructs. They are works from the heart. They are ideas and visions that people have about how to advance the game medium and tell new stories and create new experiences and new kinds of gameplay and play cultures. Yeah, I mean, I think they're getting closer now because we're beginning to see things that used to be considered art games published on consoles and published on iOS and so forth. And you can even see it actually here in Europe with people like Arte that are now publishing games. Was an independent film studio originally. Somebody called IndieCade the video game art house movie festival, right? So, like where you would see, say, Sundance or even Cannes, wherever you're going to have these smaller budget games that are being produced they're funded basically by the creators themselves or by independent investors, but not by big studios. Well, I think one of the things IndieCade has really striven to do over the last decade plus is to redefine the word game. There was a pretty narrow definition of it when we first started. So there are a number of things that we have shown that may or may not be games in the strictest sense. So we're interested in playable, interactive experiences. So I guess where I would draw the line is we probably wouldn't show animation per se. But if the work is interactive and there's audience participation, so for instance, we had Tina Beck this morning giving a talk on her installation work. That kind of work, we would show that at IndieCade, and we have shown that kind of work before. Or Blast Theory, that is getting the Trailblazer Award at this evening's award ceremony. They are kind of a crossover. They're an artist collective. They make public installations. Some of their work might be a game, might not. They don't really attach themselves heavily to that terminology. So for us, the definition of game is sort of an open idea, and that was something we really wanted to do. We didn't want to have this kind of hegemonic, very formal definition that was circulating when we first started, both through the academic community and also from industry. They're like, a game has to do this, 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 and this, and we just threw all that out and said, no, it's whatever you want it to be. So that's given us the ability to have a lot of breadth in the work that we show. We were just commenting about that earlier today, actually, in our own conversation about the cultural cachet of being in an institution like this library, for instance. I think it's interesting. In the United States, we don't have the same kind of arts infrastructure, but we have intersected with museums. For instance, the Museum of the Moving Image has hosted IndieCade East on multiple occasions. And that was important for us because it establishes us within the sort of more traditional art institutional setting. So I feel like that's the case here too. But I also feel like the support of the arts in Europe and particularly in France is much better than it is in the US. So it's not as surprising to me that we're here in a cultural institution, because in some way I think the attitude towards the arts here is much more enlightened than in the US. I think that diversity has been an ongoing struggle for the video game industry at large, and it's something that IndieCade has been committed to from day one. And a couple of ways that we try to address it. One is that we look for, this is kind of my bag of tricks that I use for diversifying. A really good thing to do is to find communities that already exist, that represent the communities that you want to bring in. So a great example of this is the Twine community, which was kind of outside of indie games initially when we started. And we invited them and they came in and started submitting games and getting into IndieCade. That group had a high concentration of queer and transgender people. And so that whole community then came and became part of the IndieCade community. So I think you guys have a slightly different question about diversity. We've actually been having conversations about this with the organizers here because diversity in France is really different from diversity in the US. So I think the first point I would say is find where those people are. So if there's, for instance, third world game communities that you want to reach out to. We've also instigated coupons. So like we've done a coupon for China and a coupon for South American countries and so forth. And that brings more people because that lowers the cost of the submissions. And then the other couple things I like to do is just put people that are different in front of everybody. So for instance, I would say if you want to diversify for next year here in France, figure out who you want and then invite people from those communities to speak. Because when you put people on the stage, people see themselves reflected and then they want to be part of it. Same thing with organizing. So whenever we need to diversify some aspect of IndieCade, then I go, okay, let's find someone who has a diverse background. The biggest mistake I see people make is to put a white guy in charge of diversity. This is a bad idea. That is the last person who you should put in charge. So I think that often if you put those people in leadership roles where they have decision-making authority, the diversity problems sort of start to take care of themselves because those people have networks and they have that sensibility and they will naturally diversify your community. So those are a few ways that we use, techniques that we use to do it. So, you know, giving awards, we last year's Trailblazer Award went to Aria Harvey and Michael from Tale of Tales. So she's a woman of color. So, you know, she's received an award. So now other people know, oh, IndieCade is a place that these people are getting, you know, honored. Oh, that's such a hard question. There are so many games that I love that we show. Trying to think if there's anything here in particular. Not really. I mean, there's a few games that I really like from this year. I think Biped is really clever and charming. It reminds me of Ibn Ab, which was in our first IndieCade and is still out there getting ported. Actually, the developer is here with his newest game, the developer of Ibn Ab. I really like the RPG coloring book game. I keep forgetting the name. It's really cute. It's really good, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I like all of them. I played a couple of them here. I played some of them at IndieCade West, but actually I was the co-chair for the conference of IndieCade, the main IndieCade festival, and I didn't have much time to play actually. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll play them like before or after the festival on my own just because I have a little more time. The future of IndieCade. Well, one thing that I'm personally interested in is the what I kind of consider to be the post-screen era. Like people are still playing games on screens, but you're seeing more and more mixed reality, AR. There's a couple of AR games here, and also escape rooms. I don't know how big they are here in France, but that is the fastest growing sector of the game industry in the US at this point, and it's pretty much off everybody's radar. And then my own creative work has been in the last couple of years have been in participatory performance and theater, live action role playing, and immersive slash interactive theater, or what I call playable theater. So I think that we're going to be, we've always had those kinds of games. We've embraced them really from the outset, but I think we're going to be spending a little more time with that community because they don't have anything. There is no immersive game. There's one conference for immersive entertainment, which is really great. But there's no festival or no other way to celebrate that kind of work. And because we're always interested in finding the work that no one can see and giving it a forum, we're always sort of looking up for what is the next trend, people that are making cool stuff that no one gets a chance to see. So that's kind of where we're looking for our next areas of development.